back to our next video, and in essence this is a part of the segmented series. It's not segmented work in that sense, but it is. So let me show you where we're going. We're going to talk about a bowl from a board. It's a technique that anyone can do, and there are so many different ways to approach it that I'm just going to talk about the very basics. The first steps of how to do it, and then there's a lot of opportunities for creativity and for some real wow factors to put in. So here's one that was in the book. And this is the simplest way to do a bowl from a board. What I did, I went online and bought a block of wood. And here's a couple of slices of it. This was a cube, and it was pre-laminated like this. I just bought it from one of the woodworking dealers. So I went to the bandsaw and sliced it up into a lot of little tiny slices. And I just restacked it and rotated each one. And when that was all glued back together and turned like you would normally turn a bowl, this is what came out. Simplest possible way to do it. Well, that uses a lot of wood and puts a lot of chips on the floor, and most people who do bowls from a board don't do it that way. They don't want to waste all that wood. They'll make a single laminate and cut it into pieces. Here's what happens. You make a board, you glue up all these little pieces, and you go to your saw, some technique, and cut these at about a 45-degree angle. And when you do that and restack them in the opposite order, this second piece if put on top will actually overlap that first one, and the third one, the fourth one, and so on. So I can take one board, cut it at about a 45-degree angle with a very narrow curve, and restack them in the opposite order, and I can create this nice cone-shaped bowl. And that is the technique that most people do. I don't know if this illustrates help very much, but it's a start. So let me show you again. Here's a laminate board I glued up for a project. Just a whole bunch of little boards glued up, and I made it fairly thick so I could slice it. And then from my plan, I cut it into circles, and I laid out the different ring sizes that I would need for the project. And then I cut those rings, and as you can see, if they're cut at an angle, I could restack them. And re-glue them. And by rotation, I can create all sorts of different kinds of patterns. But now cutting these rings, typically if you have a scroll saw, it's not too difficult to do. What you'll end up doing is marking out where the ring needs to go, come in with a very small drill bit, drill a tiny hole at the right angle, stick your scroll saw blade through there and cut that circle. If you don't have a scroll saw, it gets a little bit more complicated, because if you're going to cut this on a bandsaw, I'm first going to have to slice this in half. And then with my bandsaw I can cut this, and I can cut this, and then glue these two pieces back together again. The problem with having a bandsaw, you can't stick that blade through the little hole. Well, that's a second way of doing it. Very common, and that and the scroll saw are the most common ways of doing it. I have a third way. I do it just a little bit different. And what I want to do is to show you a very short video segment about the process that I use. I glue up the boards and I cut them on the lathe using a thin parting tool. And I'll show you how that's done. And then we'll come back and kind of review it. hope that helped you see some of the steps that I go through, but let me expand on that just a little bit. I start off by making a drawing. And this drawing allows me to see how the various layers are going to overlap with each other or not. Because my bowls are not triangular shaped, that V-cut doesn't work. I want to have some vertical rise to this, which means I may need more than one ring of the same or very similar diameters in order to create that vertical wall. So I make a drawing, and then from the drawing I then can figure out what I can use. Now the base was one piece, and I found about 2 layers up I can use another slice out of that same piece of wood. And I have a second board, which I used 3 times, and the original board I used 4 times, and there was one ring up here I needed that neither board would fit, so I had to cut a third one. So I made several individual thin boards, cut the holes of the rings, and then built the vessel. Well, here's what you saw in the video. I have this faceplate with a block of wood screwed to it, and I simply clamp my board against that faceplate and use this very thin parting tool to cut those rings apart. Thin because I don't want a very wide kerf between each of the rings. I need to save as much wood as I can. Thin and saving the wood means the bowl I actually made was really pretty small. Here's the board that I started with, one of the boards. I've numbered them. This is number 2, what's left of it. Here's what's left of board number 3. And when I cut those pieces out, I had enough left over that I was kind of able to make the second one. And I used the same idea, but I just scaled everything down a little bit. Well, I think I got carried away. More for fun than for educational purposes. So I took the scraps from that one and made a third one. And in order to get the size right on the third one, I simply took the disc, laid it down, and took a pencil straight up and down and drew a circle around it, which stood out maybe 1/8 of an inch from the side. And then I cut that piece out, made it round. And I stood the pencil up and did another circle around that one and made the next one. So this is all by eye, no planning at all. And if you could see, these pieces don't necessarily even match. They're just fun and interesting. So, bowl from the board, interesting little process. It's an opportunity to go to a lot of detailed examples. There are a lot of famous turners out there who have specialized in this technique. Some using extremely finely laminated boards to create very intricate patterns. And then other people who will do a nice thing with some special designs built into the side. And we'll give you a couple of references of sites that you might be able to check out just to see where some of the other work can be done. But I do it this way because I want a bowl that has some curve and size shape to it. So bowl from a board starts with laminations, which is just good woodworking, and then making a drawing and laying out your circles and finding some way to cut them into the thirds. And if you want to go back and refer to this again, in my book on segmented turning, there is a complete chapter on this technique for how to do that. And in fact, that's the piece that was done in the book. And I do have 2 pieces of the original cube of wood still remaining. So chapter 7 is a good place to go. You can take a look at it there. So thank you for looking into one more aspect of segmented turning. And I've gotten back to thinking about it again, and I've had enough requests that I think our next 2 videos are going to be a 2-part series on what's called open segment turning. The difference between that and what we've done in the past is that the pieces do not touch each other, so there has to be ways to mount them into the bowl differently than we've done in the past. It requires another fixture. But the good news is the accuracy of cutting the segments is not quite so important. So I'll see you in the next video for part 1 of open segment wood turning. Keep the comments coming, subscribe. We appreciate it. We appreciate your viewing. Thanks. We'll see you soon.